Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive or if you think like one and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of Xquadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve even more extraordinary results. Because no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO. Darren Comber is the CEO of Scott Brownrigg. It's an architectural design firm that has repeatedly been listed as one of the top 1,000 companies to inspire Europe by the London Stock Exchange Group. And Darren explains how when he started in the business, it was a 40-person business with £3 million of debt. And over the years, he's transformed that into one of the top 100 design practices globally. It's got true financial stability, and he's making an impact in the real areas that he set out at the very start. Darren has got 3 strategies for continual and sustained growth, and we dive into those. And really interestingly, he's taken a very radical model for employee ownership. A lot of leaders talk about wanting to give their employees a sense of ownership, but Darren's actually done it. He's put his money where his mouth is, and he's created a radically open employee ownership model. We also get into other issues. Scott Brownrigg is a heritage brand with a lot of history, and he had to turn that around and do new things with it. And what were the lessons from that journey? So sit back, enjoy this conversation with Darren Comber. Hi, Darren, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm going to enjoy this because I've already found out in just a few minutes of speaking with you that you've got a really different view from many leaders, I think, around growth and what it means. Your company, Scott Brownrigg, has really been featured by the Financial Times in view of the growth and success it's had. But what I understand for you is that the actual financial results are secondary to a larger impact that you want to make in the world. And this is the Impact Multiplier podcast. Let's jump right in there. Just go there. What is this growth that most excites you, or what's the impact that most excites you about the business? First of all, tell us what's the business. Let's go there.
Well, okay.
And then what's it all about? What gets you up in the morning?
Right. So we're an architectural firm. We've got a long history, so we can trace our roots back to 1910. So the company's been around a long time, and over the decades, I guess it's fair to say it's changed enormously to remain relevant. I think that's the key thing, and it's a key theme that we've had about driving the business and driving growth in the business. So we have 8 offices globally. Where head office is in Covent Garden in Endell Street, and we have always had an international theme as a practice. So we were one of the first practices back in the 50s to really push the boundaries and export our design services. And that's been a theme that's run through for the practice. In terms of growth, though, something that we touched on it just in our sort of preamble before we started talking about it, that as you asked the question, for an architectural practice, it isn't about staff complement and numbers as a defining characteristic. So it isn't just, well, are we the biggest in the world? It's, for me and for us, it's the defining characteristic has been more about the services and skills that we can provide and the impact then that has on societal change and our ability to match the needs on the global platform. So size is important in one respect to be a global player, but in terms of does it have to be a prescribed number for us to be effective? No, it doesn't.
So let me just play that back for a second. Yeah. So what you're really saying is that the size and the growth that you've seen has been the outcome of this desire to bring new skills and services.
Absolutely. Yeah. Bringing additional bandwidth to the practice has been really important. And I think that's important for a number of reasons. One is that it it makes the practice more diverse in terms of the skills that it can offer, the elements of influence we can actually bring to the table as well. But in other senses, it also is quite important that it makes us less vulnerable to the vagaries of the markets. And that's really, really important. As an architectural practice, we very much are, our fortunes are very much predetermined by the economy, as most are, but very much in the construction world and, where we sit, we do have to have a diverse platform from which to build. And we found that in being an international player, that has given us, if you like, some degree of insulation as markets have either developed in certain parts of the world and perhaps depressed in others. But what is a constant is that the skills that we have are required and actually sought worldwide. So that is the constant, and the other movable feasts have worked around that.
Yeah, it's and actually that portfolio piece you just mentioned, I think, is often key for companies over the long haul. In this series around secrets of scaling, I've seen repeatedly this idea of almost all the companies have had some sort of portfolio, some kind of diversity that's helped them ride out different market shifts in different parts of the world. Let's first jump into your own story. What I understand is when you took over the company, Scott Brownrigg, when you actually went in and I think you bought it out, the company was pretty much on its knees. So why don't you, tell us that story. When was that? What was the company when you found it? And by way of comparison, where are you now, perhaps in terms of revenues or people, whatever you want to...
I joined the practice. Obviously, was very, very successful leading up to or through the 80s, and many architectural practices were in the same position. In the 90s, we had some big projects that really took out a lot of profits of the company, and it was a partnership at that time. A lot of partners left, took a lot of money out of the company, and as a result, the company had a significant debt at that time. So when I joined back in 95. The debt, I think, was around about 3 million, which is a lot of money now, but it was an awful lot of money then. And we were supported by the banks after a while to trade out of that. We had a very small staff complement. I was just a junior at that point. Right. But I saw an opportunity and I thought, this practice has a really good brand. And there was an opportunity to be part of a team. So I definitely wouldn't lay claim to I was the one that rebuilt it solely, but I was willing to be part of that team that would build on the great foundations and the heritage brand that Scott Brownrigg has always enjoyed. So it was more about the opportunity rather than a single point in time then. And then over that period of time, we looked at how we could reshape the business. What were the things we needed? How could we include people in as part of that journey? Make it more attainable to a wider network of people within the business as well. So going from a partnership, we then transitioned into a limited company where the shareholding was quite narrow, just to the board directors, and I wasn't on the board at that time. And so I had an insight into thinking, well, this isn't really sort of equitable. If you want buy-in, there was an opportunity to get more shareholders across the business. So over time, and when I joined the board, so I've sat on the board now for 20 years. So I've seen quite a lot of coming and going, and 12 of those years I've been chief executive. But it was really my desire to widen out that share ownership to get participation. So shareholder participation. And it really did work because by the time at its height, we had about a third of the company as shareholders. And everybody had that real sense of ownership. And I think the ownership is something that I always felt quite passionate about because for many, owning shares is a statement of ambition. And that ambition, I think, can be something that you can really then translate into actions and positive actions. So we've been a team for a long time, I think it's fair to say. The ownership was an EBT. So we transitioned partnership to a limited company, which was administered through an EBT. And in 2021, so last year, we transitioned to a full EOT, so 100% employee ownership trust. And that's brought an even wider dynamic now that leads to, an enhanced succession strategy for the business. So yeah, we've come along a journey, really, and it has been one of wanting to, I guess, play in a scenario where everybody has the ability to be a master of their own destinies. The output can be measured by the input that goes into it. So I've always, worked quite hard, as many people do, but sometimes you don't see the output. But as long as you're satisfied that you've done the best you can, then we see a different picture. And where the practice is now, so we went from, very small practice. We had only 13 staff when I joined in London. I think we had a total complement of about 40. We had quite a small turnover. And now we are in the top 100 architects in the world. We're ranked in the top 100 in the world. We're in the top 20 in the UK. We have 8 offices globally, including New York, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, and then a series of other offices. So we do have now a very global reach, and we're a stable company. We've invested, we've bought our own property. So we've built a platform from which we've got real financial stability. And that has really helped us iron out the peaks and troughs of the economic market, to have that stability in the business. And it allows us to do the things that we really want to do, and that is essentially design buildings and infrastructure and environments that people can enjoy.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, and getting to that place where you say you've got the freedom to do those things without looking over your shoulder, or at this quarter by itself, or whatever it happens to be, which I guess is great for an uncertain world. What did you do really well looking back? Obviously ownership is a big theme, and I think it's great because often people talk about creating a sense of ownership. Well, one shortcut to doing that is to actually make people owners, right? Which is fantastic, and I can see how that plays out for you. What are the other things that you think, looking back, are real parts of your success formula that you've been able to roll out?
So I gave this some thought. So I guess one of the biggest things that I think we have done well, and that is acknowledging that many people have contributed to this. I've really just been the conductor in many respects on this. People have contributed in enormous ways. But what we've done as a practice is we've added skills, diversified our offer. We opened new offices, acquired businesses, secured high-profile projects, and within that defined new ownership structure, it gave us the opportunity to generally look forward. So we're always looking forward. I think you mentioned I don't look over my shoulder. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder to make sure that what's behind is what we want. But I think that ability to look forward is really important. And there's 3 key areas that have built that. The first one is what I'll define as expansion aligned with the business vision. And we built that on the principle of 3 horizons. So Horizon 1, obviously, is the core business. Horizon 2 is where we extended that core business. And Horizon 3 is the bit that I like to think that sometimes I'm in, is where the crazy entrepreneurs are, looking at things that we may never do, but if we needed to explore them to see whether they would work for us. So we created our own horizons through new avenues of interest that added width to what we have done. And that gave us an enduring practice rather than something that's quite temporary and chasing new fashions. We wanted something to look at what's relevant in society, not just today, but where's it moving, and what added skills would we need to meet the demands. And that's really quite important, that trying to or remaining relevant is probably one of the most important characteristics, and why we've been around over perhaps 100 years. And for that one, I would add in things like new technologies we've embraced, that are particularly relevant to the built environment. And we've done that through links with other businesses as well. So outside of architecture, so a good example would be looking into the world of Formula One and seeing what they do. And we have our own digital twin business. Now, that's not new. A digital twin isn't new in certain areas, but in the built environment, it is very new. And it isn't something that is mainstream at the moment. But we have a business, the digital twin unit, that was set up specifically to look at the built environment. So that added bandwidth to what we did. I guess the second one is focusing then on capability, talent, and succession. So what I mean by that is obviously the capability of the business to deliver the strategy and vision through identifying what our capabilities are and then putting those into format plans. And we've always had a view on is looking towards what our goals and visions are and then designing the company to match that, rather than the other way around, looking at the skills we have and saying, well, okay, where can we go with that? So we've always had that as a goal.
That's what I actually call future back thinking, right? Often I like to talk about future back and outside in. So what's the external environment we're in, how's it changing, and then work from that. Where often otherwise we look at what are our resources, existing capabilities, what we want to do next, and that's a different approach.
Indeed. And I think to do that as well, we focused on people and our product, and where we have looked to replace individuals at a certain time. People come and go. That's a natural thing to have churn in business, and we haven't sought to then just replace and replicate skills. What we've looked to do is add diversity. So we haven't tried to just find people in our own image. It's about saying, well, okay, there's a whole raft of different skills out there, and if we can embrace them. And again, as I say, they're not just in architecture or laying architects. They're in different areas. And then the third item, which which is the most important for us as architects, is our product. And what we've done there is really this vertical and horizontal expansion of our product. So it aligns in a way to what I talked about with the three horizons, but so they all sort of turn around each other, because expansion of our core services has been absolutely fundamental to building the business.
Yeah, I love the way that you really frame that out in such three nice ways, right? You've got this time dimension, you've got this kind of resources dimension, I guess, in terms of the capability, and then you've got, what are you actually bringing to market in terms of the product? What would be an example, perhaps, of one of those where you, which might have felt like a risk at the time, might have been a bit difficult for you to do, or you had some internal doubts about, but actually paid off? Is there something there where you think, am I even doing the right thing here? And yet time proved you right.
Yeah, I think that would be our international expansion, I guess. I think the products, a lot of the things we're doing, they feed into each other so well that they're businesses in their own right, but also they support what we do as architects. But I think one of the key both strengths and actually one of the difficulties we had was our international expansion. And I always sort of worked around this view that, first and foremost, you've got to have a plan. I think everybody sort of, would subscribe to that. But I read a really quite nice quote from somebody once about, maintaining a plan. And it reads kind of like this: the nicest thing about not having a plan is that failure comes as a complete surprise, but is not preceded by a period of worry and depression. And it was written by a chap called John Preston from Boston University. And I always muse on that one because, there's positives and negatives and everything. It's kind of saying, if you haven't got a plan, at least you haven't got to worry about it. But the key thing for me is that having a plan, and the reason why that's actually quite relevant is we define our 5-year plan, but we make it flexible enough that things change over a period of 5 years. So it isn't so rigid that you can't say, okay, well, we need to change course now. So we'll have defining qualities in there that we have to meet. But one of those, and bringing it back, I guess, to the international dimension, internationally has been something that we've been committed to about developing our international footprint. And what we've learned over time is that we needed to be smarter at doing it. So the ability to go into an international market and open a new studio might sound, well, that's really easy, isn't it? You just pitch up and you open up and everyone says, oh, great, the Brits are here and, this, that, and the other. Well, that's not the case at all. And I think because we tried to do it over time with our own funds as well, that's presented certain challenges because it's difficult to grow when you are restricted by the capital that you have on offer. We have been successful and we've achieved it, but it's taken longer than I would have liked in many of those areas. So if I was doing that again, we've chosen to do it under a different model now, where we have a much smaller footprint and we track everything back to the UK as well. So we're now a very integrated company rather than operating as silos. It's something that we've never wanted to do. So we've avoided that silo mentality, and we have what's called one Scott Brownrigg. So everybody is part of the same company. It doesn't matter where your studio might be, whether it's in Amsterdam, whether it's in New York, whether it's Singapore, you all share resources and the skills go to where they're required rather than trying to develop a market in a particular area. So we found that that's more, has been considerably more successful for us over time, rather than the idea of developing a studio in a market and trying to replicate what we had in the UK.
Hi, this is Richard. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to tell you about my book, Making Time for Strategy, which is being released in January 2023. It deals with perhaps the number one challenge I've come across in my coaching work with top executives: how to get out of the weeds of operations and make time for the high impact strategic work that will lead to breakthrough results. If you're serious about multiplying your impact, you do need to elevate your use of time. So I highly recommend that you head over to makingtimeforstrategy.com, where you can find out more about the book and download some free chapters. Now, back to the conversation. Right. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so you're able to flex around demand internationally a bit more flexibly.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I've seen both of these things coming out. I think in professional services, my background was in consulting professional services as well. And I definitely saw at the stage of development of that company was that definitely the integrated model made a lot of sense and worked really well. On the other hand, I've seen businesses and interviewed people on this podcast who have done extraordinarily well with the very let 1,000 flowers bloom kind of approach, which prioritizes entrepreneurial zeal and empowerment in different regions. So it's really interesting how both models can work, but I think you have to commit to the right to a model and align around that.
No,
was there anything that you did that, looking back, you think was a mistake, or it really made growth painful? Like a lesson to avoid, if you like, from your long and illustrious journey.
I think there's some obvious things like never taking anything for granted. Sort of the ability to acknowledge that a practice has history is a very core benefit, but it can actually hold you back as well. So a lot of people, we're very fortunate that the brand is well known in the architectural circle, but it's what it was known for. And that's what's really important, that, yes, having a brand. I mean, it's two things. I guess sometimes I've often said, well, it's better to be known for something than not be known at all, which you have heard many times. But I think where you want to position your brand is really, really important. And I think this is where if I go back, maybe a decade or perhaps longer, we were known for certain things that weren't really where we wanted to take the vision of the practice. So we had that, in a sense, it held us back. So we made reference to it and it opened doors, but actually people thought we did something different. So we've had to change over time. So I guess it wasn't necessarily it's a bad thing, but it was something we acknowledged that if you really want to be in a different place, you really do have to be aware that people perceive you for a certain thing.
Well, actually, perception is such an interesting thing. When I work often I'm asked to come in working with perhaps people in the leadership team who might need to work on a key behavior, for example, to really, fulfill their potential. And often there's two stages, one of which is the actual shift in behavior, but the second is the shift in perception. Because even when we change what we're up to, the stakeholders around us, everyone's too busy thinking about themselves to really notice that you've changed. That applies to a company, it applies to individuals, it applies to all sorts of things. And actually managing perception, helping perception catch up with reality, is the essential part of the process, because without that, you might be doing all these other things, but people don't know, they don't realize, or they still have the same emotional reaction towards you, or put you in the same bag.
True. And I think, it's we're obviously talking about, impact multipliers. And this is one of the key things for me, that, it has an exponential impact, if you like, that by taking the practice and outwardly branding it into the vision that you want it to go into, then obviously you can attract more talent, best talent, you can retain the talent you have, but also you operate then in the markets you really want to. And one of the key things for us, and sustainability has really come onto the world stage in the last maybe 5 years. But I'll go back to 20 years ago when we really invested in it. We were designing things like the Environment Agency's headquarters down in South Oxfordshire. It was in a time when it wasn't on anybody's radar, but we've built on that, and so now we're respected within our own profession, that we are somebody that haven't just jumped on something and thought, great, this is going to be something good to do. It is something that we've invested in over time. So we have a depth of knowledge and a desire to go somewhere and to make that positive impact in everything that we do. Whether it be through carbon reduction, whether it be through sustainable environments, how you get there, what you do when you're there, all of those things are completely embedded. And that's been a key part of the golden thread of Scott Brownrigg for decades now. And now we're seeing that actually the vision that we had is one that is being embraced, but we've all got a long way to go. So we won't track down into that one today, but it is quite interesting that if you continue to develop to the theme of your vision, then you can actually build a very sustainable business as well, because you don't get diverted to go over to what you think might be the new thing coming along. You do stay on the track of what you have as your core beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so helpful. So, Darren, I'm just aware of time, and let's flip over perhaps to a little quick fire questions as we kind of try to draw this to a close. I think there's been so many interesting things here. I think you've done it's a really interesting insight into the way that you've taken this business that was so small and debt ridden, and were quite intentional, I think, around how you expanded, how you built capabilities, and all these things, and how you reshifted this whole brand positioning to do what you wanted to do, and to be pretty innovative by the sound of it, with the Formula One, the digital twin, these other areas. But I'm always curious as to what's going on in the depths of the leader. So what's a favorite quote that inspires you, that perhaps you bore your team with on a regular basis? What's shaped you?
A favorite quote? I guess I don't really have a favorite quote, but I think that I've benefited through reading one of an author that I have a lot of time for, and I probably couldn't go through all of his quotes, but Malcolm Gladwell has been a big impact, if you like, reading his books and seeing that actually it's society that changes things sometimes, not, and responds to economic circumstances. And out of those economic circumstances, good can actually come, because it changes the whole narrative where we are. And I think, the pandemic, obviously a significantly terrible position for everybody, but we were all affected. And what we had to do was find our own ways of getting through it. So you utilize the skills that you have, and you acknowledge that you can't do everything, but if everyone uses the skills they have, we can actually make a quantum shift in change. So I think that would probably be one. And then I think for inspiration, for me, I've Steve Jobs is perhaps an obvious one for everybody, but I think because it's aligned with product, and that's quite a lot of what we do.
Right.
The knowing, you don't need it before you've got it sort of quote.
Yeah.
That wasn't his quote, but you understand exactly by giving somebody something they didn't know they even wanted. I think is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that, we strive to do that, to create places, environments that people enjoy. And they didn't realize that they could have that sense of enjoyment through something that you've done. So I think that's kind of what the relevance I'm trying to put into it rather than strictly business.
Yeah, that's great. So what about a book? I mean, it sounds like Malcolm Gladwell's a key author. Is there one book that you would, pull out as a key influence?
I think let's stay on that theme. I think everyone has to read Outliers. The story of success, and it isn't just about saying read this and you'll be successful. I think it is that sort of sense of the narrative of making the most of hidden advantages and extraordinary opportunities, rather than just thinking that it's about exceptional people that make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing for me.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, exactly. It's what you do with what you get.
Indeed.
Yeah, I love it. What about what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self, or to somebody who's 20 years old and get stuck into things?
Well, that's an interesting one, because I've heard a lot about imposter syndrome recently, and I've listened to a number of podcasts, and it comes up each time, and I think it exists in all of us. That's my view, so I'll give you my view. I think there's been times when I thought, wow, why have I been asked to do this? Surely somebody else is better suited to doing this. But, I think that's a natural trait. And I think sometimes you don't have it, it doesn't keep you alive. But one of the things that I would track back to, I guess, on that is that when I started here in my 20s and I was given the role of lead designer, and, bear in mind, it was a big task then to lead the design of a, sort of firm such as this. And when I took on that role, I was asked at a dinner by somebody, or rather they made reference and said, you're awfully young to be doing this role. Do you think you can do it? And at that time, I just sat back and I simply said, well, I guess we're going to find out. and that was really, I guess, before we all sort of delved into, should I, be worried about, can I do it? It was a case of, well, hopefully I can, and we're going to find out. So yeah, I think, having that sort of confidence that you can use your best abilities to advantage for everybody, I think is one of the key things. And look at the qualities you have rather than aspiring to the qualities that somebody else has got, and focus on those and embrace those. Listen to other people, learn from other people, I think is a massive thing. I've been fortunate to have good mentors along the way. As I said earlier, I have not done this on my own, and I wouldn't pretend to have done so. But what I have been able to do is use my qualities to surround myself with the best people. And that's allowed me to grow the good qualities perhaps that I've got and focus on those. And then the bits that I haven't got, I bring those in. I don't try and and that gives us then a really super effective team.
Absolutely. Yeah, your point about imposter syndrome, one of my little phrases is, imposter syndrome is a feature, it's not a bug. I actually wish my clients had more imposter syndrome, because it means they're playing a big game, they're pushing the limits, they're getting out of their comfort zone, they're not staying complacent, comfort zone is when your competency exceeds your confidence levels. That's what's going on, but it's a good place to be, actually. So I guess my favorite question, Darren, no matter how much we've achieved, there's always a next level to get to. So what's the next level for Scott Brownrigg? What are you guys up to next?
So we've got some fantastic projects coming along that we're working on at the moment. I think for us, it is about the really being credible on the international stage in terms of our building stature, and I don't know when you ever reach that, if you like, but we are known worldwide, and I think that that's important to us, that we continue to make an impact or contribution on the world stage. So I think that's where we want to go, if you like. So contributing in areas that perhaps don't have some of the knowledge or access to talent that we are fortunate to have. So taking that elsewhere. That's one of the key things for me. And I think for me as well, the sort of legacy aspect, and what I mean by legacy is about maintaining an environment where people can create and achieve something. So that for me is wider than, what do I want to achieve? I think for me, the legacy, going forward is to maintain an environment where you can make that positive difference, where you can eventually look back on your career and say, I really achieved something with the skills I had, rather than I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what impact's all about, right? This is why I love the word impact, because it speaks to financial success, but it actually speaks to this sense of, legacy. What do I actually create that really moves my soul and I'm satisfied about?
Yeah.
Darren, what will you need to do differently yourself, right? How do you need to reinvent yourself if you want to multiply your own impact?
I think what we need to do is continue as a business to broaden out our succession plan. So now that we're an EOT, I think we have a great opportunity to allow greater talents to come through and actually have a massive impact on where we go. So I think that's quite key to allow that. And I think, as a CEO, that's always a challenge, because, you've driven something and letting parts of it go are quite difficult, but it's absolutely fundamental that happens. And it isn't about letting go. It's about saying, you can't fail at doing this. You need to try it. And I think, being there and widening out our team is one of the things that I'm going to look to do in the future. And I think that's really, really important, because I've always had the opportunity to be part of that team, perhaps as, very much as a leader, but I think, leadership comes in very different forms. And I think, we're going to see over the next decade, the whole landscape change in what that really means. And I just think it's a really, really exciting time. So, yeah, I'm very fortunate. I've never had a job. I have a career that just and a hobby that's allowed me to do the things that I love.
Beautiful. So, Darren, if people want to get in touch with you or with the business, how do they do that?
Anybody can email me on d.comber@scottbrownrigg.com. Happy for that. Happy to pick the phone up to people if they'd like to call me as well with, sort of things that are interesting to them. I think that sort of ability to interact with people that want to share your values is fundamental. And it adds to the enjoyment of everything. So it doesn't have to just be in the field of architecture. We've, as I mentioned earlier, our greatest success has been actually looking outside of the sphere of what we do and embracing other technologies, because we all have something to offer. And when you bring them together, you really get some great things happening. So, yeah, feel free to contact me, please.
So this has been great. Thank you, Darren. I've really enjoyed hearing about some of the mechanics of what you got up to and how you've led the business over the last couple of decades, I guess. But I've also enjoyed hearing about your heart, right? The impact you want to make, the kind of values that come out, I think, here around team and sharing it out, right? To the extent of employee ownership, but I think also just the way that you've called other people out, said it's not your own, it's not just you, it's the team, all these things. So I think that both of those things come through, the business acumen and the desire for impact. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. Looking forward to continuing to hear about the journey.
Thank you, Richard. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? If you're ready to learn more about our content, our coaching, and our community, then visit us at xquadrant.com.